expert practitioners. We are glad to having you back in the second part in such a great number. We are waiting for some more participants to come in. Nevertheless, the time is ripe, I believe, to commence with this program of the day. We are going to spend about an hour and a half, close to 2 hours together, discussing circularity. And as promised, we will go deeper into some particular aspects of the understanding of risk in relation to circularity and sustainable, and particularly of the circular transition. We are going to first of all look deeper to the enhancements of the circular assessment model, and then we will try to bring in some context. First of all, we will see into how the relationships between financial intermediaries and their clients are changing, and secondly, we are going to look deeper into leadership challenges related to circular and sustainable transformations. My name is Giacomelli. I'm privileged to be your host today, and I'm going to lead you through the program. As you know, this seminar is freely accessible to everyone, thanks to the support we are receiving by the Public Scholarship Fund of the Republic of Slovenia. This program is supported by the funding provided by this fund and the related supportive program of the Slovenian government and the European Union. We are thankful to that. Not just that the seminar is freely accessible, materials will be available on our website after the end of this seminar. So they will be freely accessible as well. And also the recording of this second part as well as of the first part is also going to be available through our YouTube channel, again accessible from the website of the Circular Business Academy. Today's program starts with a presentation of the upgraded Circularity Assessment Score and the opportunities for its use. We will proceed with a presentation titled Challenges and Required Action from Banks and Companies. Christoph Püntmann, who is here with us again, and I welcome him, of course. Hello, Christoph. Christoph will hold the presentation to that, and which will be followed by Katja Chleb. Katja is also here with us, and I'm glad to having you, Katja. Circular business model transformation and its implication for organizational growth and leadership. We are going to remind you all that of our Circular Expert Practitioners Club and accept a new member to our club. Today's speakers, Christoph, Katja, and this leads me to the first presentation of the day. I hope you can still see some of that. I think now we are together again. Yeah. And I think we can proceed with the first topic. I would first of all like to thank to all those who have taken time and who have explored the enhanced QCAS, which stands for the Quick Circular Assessment Score, in its upgraded version, which is now accessible through the website of the Circular Business Academy. I will spend some more time talking about that and then acquaint you with these enhancements, and then I'm going to lay out also the next steps of these assessments and how this can be used in several contexts. As you know, the Circular Business Academy has been launched in 2019, and it's an advisory unit of GM, and is destined to become a standalone organization, a dedicated platform that enables entrepreneurs, managers, experts, investors, policymakers, and others to embrace business model innovation. We see this as an extraordinary opportunity for the value creation in a changing business environment. There's some background that led us to the establishment of this business unit, which led us through the very early experience in some circular transformations, including the Circular Shield, who presented also here today by the founder Nico Kumar, Fonda, the fish farm, and many others. There's also the roadmap towards the circular economy of Slovenia on our record, and some more engagements. So we see our target market as the whole Europe, well, including Scandinavia, which somehow misses in the fog here on this map. And definitely the opportunity is going circular in a framework of a new development paradigm, respecting environmental and social or planetary constraints. The opportunity derives from a chance to make good business by going circular, by taking it, by embracing opportunities arising from circular transformations. We are here to fill in several gaps, knowledge transfer gaps, dealing with insufficient systemic incentives, and evaluating and implementing projects related to concrete business opportunities. Circular Business Academy is supported by its faculty. You have, through our seminars, you've gotten to know some of these people. As said, Christoph is one of faculty members. Last time you met Slaven Michkovic as well, and it's been a network of an expanding network of several participants who have been involved, or who are being engaged in our activities. Let me just put some more context to all this. What I'm going to tell you is how the circular assessment is going to be improved. But I think it's really useful to underline some of the points that in this early 2021 that make the CAS particularly useful. One such thing is, of course, the new Circular Economy Action Plan, which is going to see quite some action through this year, and it underlies two important aspects. It's not just dealing with reducing waste in its immediate agenda. There's the sustainable product policy framework, which stresses the business models which are focused on the product design. And the next important notion I would like to underline is that the action plan defines or prioritizes cross-sectorial value chains to which further actions and regulatory framework transformations are going to be attuned. Furthermore, as you can see on the right hand, it is a set of coordinated actions ranging from financial markets and investments and R&D to the multi-level transitional incentives from regions, cities to workforce environment, and it definitely demonstrates that the circular transformation is an essential part of the European Green Deal, and that is going to be decisive for the objectives to be reached. The value chains, focus on value chains rather than industries or sectors. About the plastic sector, which was the first one to be tackled already in the previous mandate of the EU Commission. There's textiles, electronics and IT, packaging, batteries and vehicles, construction and buildings, food, water and nutrients coming up. And particularly in this year, textiles, electronic and packaging will be in the immediate focus. I've underlined the sustainable product policy network, and of course, last but not least, the kickoff of the International Agreement for Plastics and the launch of the Global Alliance are on the roadmap. One more notion before going into the assessment: the taxonomy and financial intermediation. As you know, the last year, in the last year, under the sponsorship of the European Commission, the classification system is, which establishes the list of environmentally sustainable economic activities, has been completed, and this is an activity that is further managed by a platform on sustainable finance, an advisory body which is subject to which actually helps the European Commission developing these activities, and this is now a bedrock in the field of financial intermediation. Christoph will deal more precisely with this topic. It helps us, and all this leads us to the understanding of linear and circular risks in the decision making and in investing. What will be what will now come in the focus of our topic. There are some important changes in the relation between financial intermediaries and clients, as we will see, and the forward-looking context is the perhaps the key turning point right now. When is a firm considered circular? Is of course a question of several criteria. It cannot be measured by one single meter, by one single measurement, and it is rather a question of an assessment, and that's why we have introduced the CAS, the Circularity Assessment Score, which provides one such assessment. As you have heard the last time from Jana, there is a clear difference between measuring and assessing. A multiple assessment score is definitely exposed to some subjectivity, some judgment-based assessments, and while we develop CAS, we try to reduce such impacts on the overall result and provide a more comprehensive and more objective tool, which of course needs progress, needs practice, and today we are already talking about a tool or the second generation of CAS of CAS 2.0 of the CAS 2.0. It is a composite measurement tool of multiple criteria, which allows to assess both the potential and the ability of a firm to close or to narrow, to slow the loops of resource flows, and is based on a standardized and validated questionnaire. The 2.0 version has been further attuned to the needs of an Interact Alpine Space project, which is titled Circular 4.0, and is therefore a fruit of further examination of elaboration, which is now being put in practice. How circularity our firm is assessed through the CAS model. We view it as a strategic orientation of a firm, and it is assessed through its application of a circular business model, which is manifested by two axes. One is the potential of a business model, or the circularity potential of a business model, to sustainably contribute to the circular economy. And the y-axis is about assessing capabilities of a firm to seize this potential that offered or made available by the business model. So on one hand, it's possible that we have a business model that actually doesn't allow for much circularity. And then, of course, a firm can be challenged to change the business model substantially. On the other hand, we may have quite some potential, but it may not be seized given the fact that current managerial focus, the vision, ambitions, and managerial practices are not set to seize this potential, and are set towards some other business objectives. So we use multiple criteria for that to demonstrate to what extent a firm uses its capabilities to contribute to the circular economy. We are going to look at this in more detail. Whoever has not been who has not been has not examined the questionnaire, there's a link that's freely accessible from the website, and you can always do it. You can assess your own company, your own organization, or you can also assess a company that you know very well, that is still there. The only difference is that you need to declare whether you are a decision maker in that organization or not. But it's just good enough if you simply evaluate the circularity of a company that you know very well, and you will still be able to see the results or the functionality of this model. So one more notion, this as opposed to other models, and we've been talking about that in the first part. This one is focused on business models. Jana Feirold last time made an overview of similar tools which help us understand circularity of companies or products. A characteristic that distinguishes this one is that it is focused on business models rather than products, rather than strategies, rather than some specific measurements or standards. And it foresees that that every company, willing or not, or I mean, in a more or less intuitive or more or less explicit way, goes through a circular transformation journey. We use in our practice, we use a 10-step transformation model introduced by Kreinhagen, Boken, and Van Open, and which actually foresees a pilot project around which, or one or more pilot projects around which a company with a clear vision and purpose set towards the circular transformation has been progressing through the years. There's one big challenge in using the CAS, and we so far we haven't seen much trouble with that, but we would like to expose that very openly. It's a consistency challenge. We know somehow intuitively, we know that whenever we speak about a business model, we speak about a potential of where our company can develop in the future. More specifically, our business model that we pursue today tells us about our circularity potential of our tomorrow's business realization, right? So at any point in time, when assessing a business model, we are looking at its potential and not its, present state of our business. So the potential is the realization of our business, potential realization of our business in the future. So that's why CAS is a future-oriented system. But what does this sketch show? That the potential today, whenever accomplished, will bring us into a position with, a more mature business model tomorrow that will further lead us to new potential improvements. Now I'm going to go through the the two axes, and the x-axis, the evaluation of the circular potential, is related to the assessment of all steps of a value chain, from the design of products and services to supply, production, logistics, marketing and sales, product use, end-of-life redundancy, reverse logistics, and disposal. So we understand that the different generic business models can make some circularity effects at different stages. And that's why, of course, the typology demonstrated by the CAS rada of a single business model in use can be quite different from one company to another. What this CAS does is actually assesses how circular we are in several stages of our value chain, let me see. This is this has got a direct connection to the understanding of risk. From the financial aspect, we try to group these approaches into three different groups: models that relate to circular design, models that relate to the optimal use, and models that relate to value recovery. The circular design models and the value recovery models typically have relatively similar risk profiles, which relate to significant investments in the technological transformation and innovations, which allow for the use of secondary resources, and optimal use models or circular use models, which are somehow in the middle, have a more peculiar risk profile, which relates to different liquidity situation, different cash inflows and outflows, as a consequence of different relationships. Just imagine a product service system, or a car sharing service, which has or a subscription model for a cellular phone. You can imagine that such a risk profile is very different from investing in technology that can recover used nylon from the end of life products. So this has a direct implication, direct use for the direct application possibilities when it comes to the understanding of risk and the financial needs of such circular projects. More recently, the notion of the value hill, which is actually this sketch, has been developed to properly address these business models. And the fourth type is of business models which are not so often addressed, are termed circular support models, and they are practically those models of companies that are enablers to other companies, facilitators. And this element particularly refers to, for example, to digitalization of products, services, and processes, allowing for the realization of circular business models. I'm going to, I'd like to switch to, okay. So these are the two extensions that I'm going to the question. Given the fact that through the Alpine Space project, Circular 4.0, which is an Interreg project, we are working on the relation between the digitalization or 4.0 industries on one hand and the circular transformations. We have recognized the importance of the technologies that as enablers of circular business models. That's why we have inserted a question related to the circular potential. This is the x-axis, traceability of supplies and inputs. It is subdivided into three simple questions. Does your organization trace the origin of material inputs before the acquisition through its own internal processes, or after the outputs are sold to buyers and or enter the consumption phase? On the other hand, on the y-axis or the commitment axis, we ask, from the managerial perspective, we ask the interviewers to make a very, very simplified self-assessment of digital maturity. These questions, of course, can be further elaborated, as we will see later on, with clear measurements. Then, thirdly, we improved a question that relates to the typology of business models. We added the circular support model because many companies are actually in this, fourth category, and we also extended the explanation what it means, being in what the primary focus in tackling circular opportunities really means. So this is a more a clearer one now. So what are the next steps? Now the questionnaire is more refined. It will be further improved in terms of the overall experience, the overall guidance through the questionnaire. We will continue adding explanations and that will help interviewers, be more precise in their answers. And we are going to work towards two basic groups of two basic enhancements. One is the assessment enhancements, and this is related to linking the questionnaire to emerging standardized or objective measurements. They have been around for some time, and they're still subject to continuous improvements. One is product or corporate footprint. The other one is life cycle assessment. There are some difference between the two, but they are very similar. And already mentioned digital maturity assessment. These can be further collected by companies, and they largely depend on the availability or the cooperation with the assessed company. Then we are going to work on sourcing in performance measurements of participating firms, allowing for further analysis. So if we know about past and current performance, financial performance or business performance overall, like the increase of the market share, profitability, return on investment, return on capital. That can, of course, give us further clues about how successful a company is. And finally, tracking progress of participating firms. So if we create over years a longitudinal database, then we will be able to provide further comparisons, further benchmarks to those who will be assessed by CAS. Then the other group of enhancements are related to service enhancements, what means that we will improve the CAS report by using horizontal and longitudinal value chain and sectorial comparisons and benchmarking. And we will also introduce extended assessment in a way that we will tune it to the needs of different target groups. Definitely two major target groups are transformation managers, first of all. And to them, we will offer business model transformation guidelines and project progress assessment. This is, of course, possible with some further insights, with short interviews with managers, and some additional information that we could collect this way. I mean, if you see the first group of enhancements above, you will understand what I mean. And then, of course, financial intermediaries, banks, institutional investors of other kind, private equity investors, business angels, like the consortia of business angels undergoing due diligence processes, etc. So they too can use CAS and can get additional service in terms of opinion and guidelines or evaluations of financing or investing opportunities. As far as the improvements of CAS report, I mean, there's certainly 3 layers of references and benchmarking that we can introduce, positioning within the growing database of responses, correlations with financial performance if disclosed or available, and over time this is going to be possible, and of course specific information guidelines based upon in that sessions with the management. I'm going to leave you some reference here, to product carbon footprint, corporate carbon footprint, and also the difference between between the life cycle assessment and carbon footprints, because these are concrete measurements that we can use to double check some of the answers, parts of the class, if they are made available by the company, and this can be then further can further improve the feedback, and over time it can of course make clearer results of the overall class. Before I wrap up, I would like to invite you or any interested firm that may be motivated to make an assessment, and use it for their own transformation purposes, to take part of the upcoming course, which is going to start on the 17th of March. In about less than a month time, really, with an initiation workshop starting on that day, which is at the same time also going to be a part of the circularity acceleration training, a part of the Circular 4.0 Interreg Alpine Space project. A course is developed around each participating firm's pilot projects or opportunity identification project. And the key principle is every firm is a story of its own, so everybody can participate regardless of the current state or level of circular transformation or ambitions or level of awareness and activities in place. So this can be really a very good initiation and engagement with the circular opportunities. That would be all for now. You're welcome to join in, and of course I will be happy to answer any questions at this point. Please. Any questions from your side? If everything was clear, then I am happy to proceed, and I thank you for your attention. I will.
I think you have one question.
Sorry?
I think you have one question from Katja.
Oh, I've got a question from Katja. Sorry, let me find it. Where is it?
The yellow palm on a white screen, so it's difficult to find it. Can you hear me, Yuri?
Yeah, I can hear you. You can please.
I would just like
to go on. Yes. Yes.
Since we have all been nourished by you with all your knowledge about circular economy for so many times, maybe now there is not crucial pending questions, but I'd like to make a comment, which is that I saw you working in practice with the company, and what Yuri is saying is really true. He's an extremely attentive listener to the specifics of the needs of the firm, where it stands, and not trying to sell a protocol, pre-prepared protocol to the company. So this is what I really, really appreciated when I invited you to our cherished client.
Thank you, Katja. I appreciate it. Same to you. So I know you are also a good listener, and I know you're going to go very deep with the aspect of with the leadership aspect on that. So I'm actually very very curious about that, I must say. And also, anybody else? Any comments? Any questions, suggestions at this point, or shall we allow Christoph to speak?
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, Christoph, please. I will stop sharing the slides, and
yeah, and I will pull up my slides. Needed to tell me whether you can actually see them, and whether you can hear me clearly.
Okay.
You can see the slides?
Yes, we can see you now. We cannot see the slides yet.
Oh. Now you can see the slides.
No?
Okay.
The green button, Christoph. And then
Yeah, I'm on the green button. It says Bildschirmfrei. I mean, it's like
yeah, choose the right application. That's
Okay, okay. Now you're sharing it, yes. And now you just go into the presentation mode, and there you go.
now you have it.
Okay.
Now you have it. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Yuri. And let me just plow on with the next subject, which is actually quite an interesting one, because if you want to get sustainability goals and a circular economy going, then it's not something that comes by itself. You have to actually use certain incentives or incentivizations. And I'm going to go through a few of them. And the one that we wanted to primarily focus on is what's the role of banks and companies, and what are the challenges and the required actions they face in order to come to a sustainable finance and a circular economy. So this is, as you see, it's like the picture I chose is basically around where I live, and it's only a few days ago, and I thought a nature picture actually fits to the subject the best. So if you go to the next slide, this is my company, Highbook. We are an advisory company for institutional investors and advise our clients on issues like asset liability management, but also on investments, how to generate finance, and a particular subject which is close to my heart is obviously going to advise them also on the process of selecting their financing in a way that it actually contributes to sustainable goals and the circular economy. So if we look at the roles of the banks and the companies, and I'm just outlining here basically the two key players, but so you see there's also other players around. A bank as such has actually, if you only look at the bank itself, it has a very limited carbon footprint in the economy. If you look at it, the direct carbon footprint, yeah, they're using paper for their printouts, they're using electricity for the buildings, and people that come to work at a bank, they have to go there by car, so it's just like a fossil fuel usage, yeah. But that's one thing. The other thing is that they have an indirect impact on the economy. And from that point of view, that's actually quite huge. It's much larger than than just looking at the operations of the bank itself. So here you basically, if you think of a bank is a very particular industry whose primary focus is to be the engine of money flows and liquidity in the markets. So from this point of view, and this usually from a private perspective, so not governmental banks, I'm talking private banks. So they can, by lending, giving credit to the different companies of different sectors with different risk profiles, they basically help deciding who's getting the monies and who's not. They get to decide that the people abide by principles of circularity, or whether it matters, or whether, and it's like they typically go by the fact that they obviously want to go to companies that have a low risk profile, companies that have a sound business model, and companies that have stable finances. So that's how they basically have the possibility, by issuing lending terms, to drive the economy and to drive real growth in the economy. So from that point of view, they don't have as I said, primary carbon footprint, which is big, but an indirect carbon footprint, which is very, very huge, because they just mirror basically the carbon footprint of the companies they finance. Okay, now this is one aspect, and we'll come in a second also how the risks of a companies are basically reflected on the bank balance sheet. But there's other ways of incentivizations, how you basically get, it's like companies to also look into these issues of sustainability, which is, we've just had this EU taxonomy regulation, which was issued last year, which also looks at how companies deploy their activities and their processes and they have given certain criteria which the companies should at least abide by one of them criterias and not violate any of the others in order to be sustainable, abide by sustainable principles. Plus, there have been issued some recommendations on the EU Green Bond standard, which is like trying to help companies to finance themselves, not directly through the banks, but with the help of banks, but into the capital markets. So it's a standard which basically lays out how the companies should deploy their activities and their processes in order to abide by the green bond goals. Apart from that, there's a certain set of disclosures that we have, because disclosures usually help that banks, as well as the companies involved, need to prove that they're actually abiding by these principles, which then has a reputational risk to both of the companies and the banks and the investors that would invest into these. So let me go to the next slides. When a bank usually looks at a company and goes through a credit approval process, then what you realize is that whatever the company's business risks are will actually be transformed into credit risks on the bank balance sheets. So if you have companies that are run by sound business models, which have markets which are understood and products which are seasoned, which have a solid customer base, where they have supply chains that are diversified, and where you have replacements for them, where you have clear governance structures. This all goes into sound balance sheets, which lower the credit risk for the banks actually lending money to these companies. So there's this Basel III regulatory framework where you already have all the grounds laid for measuring credit risk. And just naming a few elements here, like the probability of default, or the loss given default, or the exposure at default. These are just like the credit elements, plus some liquidity elements that they also have to measure, which basically comes from the fact that they didn't do this in the process before the onset of the Lehman crisis. So, but this also extends to companies that have sound business practices towards the sustainable and environmental risks. Okay, the banks have to, there's one issue that has been, one thing that has been issued by the European Union in 2014 is that they force actually banks also to issue non-financial reporting standards, which is where they have to issue on which companies they actually lend to, and to what extent these companies are actually abiding by the sustainable goals or violating sustainable goals. Now, I've listed two of the examples here, and I can briefly go into them on my next slides, which is like the 10 Equator Principles, which have been adopted by financial institutions voluntarily themselves, or the Global Reporting Initiative, which is one of the broadly used systems for reporting to these non-financial disclosures. You can go to this in a second. Another important thing that, of course, a bank is looking at when they go through a credit approval process is they look at the risk management process of companies. So it's important for them that they understand that the bank can assess the risk properly, meaning they identify the risks that they have on their balance sheet, or that impact their balance sheet. They can measure and assess these risks. So best if they have some standards that they can use so they're comparable. They know how to mitigate those risks which are not core to their actual business. I'm thinking of like whatever. You can have weather insurance, or you can storm insurance or flood insurance. If it's not part of your business, then you want to get rid of these risks. Yeah, but these are risks. They know how to tackle those or manage those risks that are part of the business. Some of these risks they want to be, it's like exposed to because it's the actual ongoing business. But other risks they can't get rid of, so they have at least to show that they monitor the systems, and then the disclosure of the risks. So it's basically a 5-pronged process that I'm laying out here, and this is part of the process that the banks go through in order to decide whether an institution or a company can actually properly assess their risks and is fully aware of all the risks involved and can actually manage them. There's another point in the credit approval process which is important, which is there's a certain minimum standards that the banks have to abide by, which is obviously they have to look at companies. I'm giving here examples, companies that are violating human rights. And we're talking, for example, child labor in India, where companies are having suppliers where they receive, for example, clothing or whatever, coffee beans from countries in, as I said, India or South America, where the conditions of labor or where child labor is is violated. Yeah. So at the same time, they also look at companies that obviously are destructive to ecology. So, for example, I know that some of the banks that I looked at, they exclude already at this point all kind of companies that are doing coal-fired production of electricity. Yeah, this isn't a must, but it is a minimum standard that a lot of banks are already abiding by. Or, which is very, very standard procedure, they're looking at companies if they're somehow connected to corruption, money laundering, arms finance, or other sectors which are kind of like not, not deemed appropriate under for example, social rules, like the gambling industry or other red light district industries or these kind of things. So these are already excluded. And then if you consider the collateral that companies can actually provide, like for example, in the real estate business, you would look at the plot and you would look at the buildings, or you would look at the machinery and some of the production or manufacturing industries. Banks have to look at these things under stress scenario. So in case the company actually performs so poorly that it actually goes bust, what is actually the production facilities worth? What is actually, because I mean, they may be old technologies. They may not be at the state of the art what technology should be. They may be fossil fuel run in facilities, or they may be, so we would call the stranded asset, the risk of stranded assets. So looking at them at a collateral perspective, looking at the collateral at a perspective under stress case, this is what also flows into the credit approval process. And then you basically come out at the end with what I would call the terms of a loan that is issued to a borrower, where the interest rate or the amortization profile or different covenants. Covenants meaning you say, okay, fine, I understand you still have problems in certain areas, whatever, your ratio of the fuel mix has to be adjusted, or the occupancy of your tenants has to be increased. Yeah. So basically the terms of the loans is what the banks can use in order to then drive the credit approving credits to the businesses which are then actually in the real economy. So just because I touched on these things, there was the Global Reporting Initiative, which is one of the most widely used forms of reporting for sustainability. And it basically consists of 4 portions. I mean, one is a very generic portion, which has general disclosures and disclosure on the management approach and these kind of things. But then the other modules go very much in detail on the 3 key aspects of ESG, if you want. It's the yeah, if it's the economic standards, the environmental standard, and the social standards. So economic standards like, okay, how do the companies that we lend money to, what is the performance, in what markets are we working, what's the economic impacts, what are the procurement practices of our clients, and what are we doing to combat corruption. Yeah, if you then go into the environmental standards, it goes really into the depth of, okay, what are the materials used, yeah, by our clients? What's the energy policies? What's the water and waste policies? And I've listed a few of those things right here. Yeah. Plus the social standards, which actually takes a very, very large catalog of things. I've just listed a few here. Employment, labor, health, diversity. Yeah. So, but there's a whole lot more that they basically go through, and they declare on what the lending standards are that they use in order to procure who are their clients, who are the debtors. Another set of rules that I've just also mentioned at the beginning is the Equator Principles. Now, these are principles that have been set up by financial institutions themselves, and they're basically also like a catalog of different rules they go through, where they say, okay, how do we assess? I mean, first of all, we categorize our clients, how they actually exposed to the ESG criteria. So are they significantly risky to the ESG criteria? Are they maybe potentially risky to the ESG criteria? And is it reversible in case they do damage to the environment or to social structures? Or are they basically not risky or only minimally risky? And so there's a 10-point principle catalog that they go through and basically mirror every company under these principles. Now, they are also like the key aspects is, again, human rights and the environment, climate-related informations. So now I've seen a few of these standards being applied by banks, and I've always seen that they like to use both the Equator Principles and the GRI rules that we had on the previous page in order to lay out the non-financial reporting disclosure prerequisites that they have to do. Okay, that to the banks. Let's go from the viewpoint of the companies. So for a company to position themselves best in order to go to a lender and ask for credit is that they basically have, I'm summarizing it here to 3 key points or 3 categories. Number 1, they have to prove that they have a sound and solid business model. So it helps that they are in markets which are well established, that they have products that are matured, seasoned in this case, that they have a customer base they can rely on. They have supply chains where they know where to get the product from. These supply chains may not be just, be from monopoly suppliers, but maybe from, as I said, a diversification of different suppliers. Plus, it makes sense for them, for example, to have very short supply chains, meaning they know they get their product from local suppliers rather than suppliers where the shipment is very long and can be interrupted very easily, can be subject to political risks. Yeah. Plus, the governance has clearly defined the responsibilities and the reporting lines. The second segment, which is very helpful for companies to attain credit, is if they show a solid set of finances. Here, a track record of stable and positive finances helps. Also, the right level of capitalization, or, as I said, the value of fixed assets and the stock, meaning that they have less reliance on old technologies, machinery which may not work or not function at a point in time, or which may not be legally usable at some point in time. I mean, maybe the government is issuing some policies that whatever diesel engines are not allowed anymore, stuff like this. Yeah. Anyway, so this is this type of the solid finances. And then the risk awareness, where they can show that they actually know how to manage the business risks, the transparent is open about their risk management process. And one important thing that I mentioned at the beginning, they're able to actually look at, I mean, it's like not only at their own business and what comes into their companies, but also go down to the suppliers. If the suppliers are in foreign countries, for example, in South America or in India, that they know what are the working conditions at the suppliers. Do the suppliers actually pollute the environment? It doesn't help if you are not polluting your environment locally, if you're actually receiving products just for the cheaper price, which is based on environmental pollution elsewhere. Okay, so in order to enhance this, I mean, it's like one thing is using mechanisms like the banks, which I pointed out, can do this as private institutions, being regulated entaties, but then having lending standards where they can impose on the actual borrowers to not only have good standards, but also abide by them and monitor them in the future. Yeah. We also have this from the government, where the government comes in and says, okay, I mean, there was, I think last July, the EU issued already the EU taxonomy regulation, which is trying to bring together basically I mean, we have all the technologies in order to create a sustainable economy. We have all the pools of capital, but in order to bring them together, you need to define basically what are what are the technologies that we should support, and we should also make it possible for companies to access capital if they can show that they abide by the principles. Okay. So it is important to define what is meant by sustainable industries. And here they have basically issued like 6 objectives where they say any of these 6 objectives should be achieved while not violating any of the other 5 objectives, which are listed down here. So climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, sustainable use and protection of water, transition to the circular economy, so we're coming back here to the circular economy, pollution prevention, and protection of diversity in ecosystems. Yeah. At the same time, I mean, this is basically the authorities controlling the companies by doing this. But then there's also the other way, which is the capital markets controlling companies and banks how to behave or how to address these issues. Which is one example is the EU Green Bond Standard, where yes, there have been a lot of other standards already around, but this one seems to, I mean, number one, it's a voluntary scheme, which means like it's only recommendations, yeah, but it's at the same time, if abided by, then it would basically be, for example, accredited by an institution like the European Securities and Markets Authority, which could say, yes, this bond is actually fulfilling the green bond standards, and therefore is something that investors can easily invest in without having to be worried that there's any of the principles which we had on the previous page, yeah, the 6 environmental objectives, are being violated. Okay, so here basically the capital markets becoming a judge on companies abiding by the principles of sustainability and circular economy. So brings me to the last slide. Circular economy aspects. How can banks and companies improve the circular economy? As I said, one way is, and this is kind of like if you want a market mechanism, it's lending standards. So banks and bank regulators play a crucial role in shaping the economic growth by deciding who they actually give finance to. Yeah. And this should be under sustainable finance and circular economy aspects. There is disclosure and reporting. which kind of like both on the side of the banks, which pushes banks in order to show who they've actually lent money to, what are their standings in, what are their practices in the lending standards, and report on it. And then there's the taxation and regulation and the other subsidy angle, where the authorities have a direct impact on companies towards the sustainability standards. Then the markets, which basically play a role where they can say, okay, if the bond has a green label, then it's something we can purchase without having to be worried that it's going to violate any of the principles. Plus, it's the aim of companies trying to improve their creditworthiness, which would mean that it would be helpful for them to apply the standards in the circular economy, so they know how they don't rely too much on scarce resources, for example, or they can reuse materials, or what we have here, they diversify their supply chains, like, for example, reducing the distance of shipping of goods, meaning it might get more expensive, but therefore this is basically the risk premium you're paying in order to not have supply chain disruptions. Yeah. Or the other example that I'm listing here, which is the reliance on fossil fuels, which may actually be also a policy risk, because at some point the government may turn around and say, we don't want you to use any coal-fired furnaces anymore, or we don't want you to use electricity from fossil fuels, or we don't want you to use diesel engines. Yeah. Anyway, one last point I wanted to make here, which was actually goes back to the presentation that we had last week, which was on banking regulation. Now, as it stands at this point, it's like the Basel III banking regulation is pretty apt already to reflect most of the circular risks or the sustainability risks by these risks being, credit risks on the bank balance sheet. So, but should there be actually an additional layer going into these capital charges, capital assessment process, by including, for example, penalties for companies using the linear model rather than, reducing capital charges for companies that are using circular economy. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. And here's my thank you page. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Christoph. Very well. You've really been very detailed in this. But how do you feel? You have put it so boldly on your conclusive slide that companies can improve their credit rating by applying actually circular economy practices. Would it be imaginable only a few years ago, to ask companies to go this way in order to improve credit ratings? Wouldn't it be kind of almost suicidal to ask them to, be that daring? Hasn't the perspective totally changed? How do you feel about that?
Well, as I said, I was like going more circular. At one point it may involve a certain investment at the beginning. And from that point of view, as I said, if your supply chains all of a sudden are not coming from India or from South America anymore, but you're trying to offer local produce to your clients, it may actually be more expensive at some point. At the point, but by reducing your risks, this should definitely help you in your eligibility process, when you're actually asking for credit. This is what I'm aiming for.
Yeah.
So what I've seen for companies that by actually lowering the volatility of their earnings, just by choosing the right suppliers, has actually benefited them to stabilize their finances and then have a much better rating score. And I don't want to call it credit rating because that always sounds like rating agencies have to be. I mean, there's an internal credit score that the banks are issuing to the
right.
Yeah, they say, oh, this is a client. They're not very rich, but they have very stable income, which is much better for the credit process than if you have somebody where, if some political event happens in China and all of a sudden or in India and all of a sudden you can't get your product anymore, your business model is dead, and you sit there until you have found to replace your supplier by some other supplier, and again you sit in somebody else's monopoly where they can basically push on your finances. So from that point of view, I think it aids the credit score in a lending process if you're actually using, as I said, circular mechanisms, or if you diversify your supply chains.
So this means that actually the word resilience, which has proliferated our vocabulary also due to the pandemic crisis, the resilience has brought in the notion that no linear business model can stay the same, most probably in the long term, right? So there's no guarantee that they can be resilient at all, given the fact that we have accepted that the perspective has changed so much. Can we talk about a complete change of perspective already at this point? Maybe there's little practice, but anyhow.
You mean due to the pandemic that we just had, we basically lived through a time where we had all of a sudden closed borders. We had all of a sudden, we have industries that cannot operate at their normal level just because they're closed down or the employees are not allowed to perform their functions. Yes, it is a test, and I would be interesting to see how it actually helps companies to find out, for example, that they should have much more diversified supply chains. So you realize this, as I said, if you get your products from abroad, and all of a sudden you can deliver to your clients.
Yeah. Christoph, I've got a bonus question for you, knowing that you've been working a good part of your career on the development of complex models of risk assessment for different securities, mostly fixed income, if I remember well, in for large corporate clients across the world, but before asking this, are there any other questions from the audience?
I think Tomasz had a question.
Yes, Tomasz, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay, great. Thank you, Christoph, for your presentation. I liked it very much. It was very concise in pointing what the roles of the banks are and the regulatory environment that they have to live in, performing their mission. I didn't want to add anything to it at all. I only would like to point to the audience to some work in that direction, which is a little bit more theoretical based and definitely supports whatever all that Christoph told us. It's by a professor from Manchester University in UK, Professor Colin Talbot, Talbot, who talks about performance regimes. I'm willing to share this information further with anybody interested. and gives it some very fundamental theoretical background. In UK, and after I have been stimulated by Christoph's speech presentation today, I will go back and combine the two in my mind.
Absolutely, would be interesting
to see where that will take me, and in my thinking about how money and call it leadership, government, whatever you want to call it, are connected, because that's the primary topic of my interest. So thanks, Christoph, for your contribution.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tomasz, for your comment. Christoph, a few days ago, JP Morgan shareholders rejected a proposal by the management to embrace sustainability principles in their decision making, and decided to stick to narrower and more traditional approach of a simple return on investment. Do you have a comment on that? How do you see the uptake among the largest banks in the world, which are at this point not European banks? Do you see the shareholder principle colliding with the stakeholder principle still at this point?
It would be interesting to see why JP Morgan actually issued that, being one of the world's largest banks, I have to say. But at the same time, we need to give credit to JP Morgan, because I think they were the ones that took that helped when we got the first brunt of the financial crisis in 2008 by buying Bear Stearns, and kind of like saving the world at least for another 6 months from the actual financial crisis that then was failed in September of 2008, when Barclays did not do the same. Apart from that, they all had the reasons why one did it and why the other one did not. So at the end of the day, I would actually have to look at what JP Morgan issued. It's interesting that you say this, but let's put it this way. I actually even went to my local bank and I said, like, can you just give me a catalog on what are the principles of your bank here in my hometown? What are the principles that you use to combine lending standards, sustainability? And they said, it's such a new subject at this point that I was like, yes, we just had this EU taxonomy regulation come out last year. We have this green bond standard, which is a recommendation from about 1.5 years ago. So, I mean, these are all pretty much hot off the press. And it's like, I know sometimes these, to turn a regulation into practice, it may take a few years, but once it's there, it's pretty solid. So I'll have to look at this, what JP Morgan said. I'm sure there's some reasoning behind it.
Okay. Any other reflection? I see Katja is ready.
Yeah, she's in the stuff.
If you agree, I will pass. Yep. Thank you very much, Christoph. Indeed,
thank you very much.
Very insightful. And Katja, the word is yours now to talk about leadership issues related to the sustainability transformations at the corporate level, please.
Thank you so much. I'll just wait to share my screen.
Okay, this means that we have to, I believe, Christoph, you have to exit the sharing option, right?
Yes.
Katja, you can override it. So
can I?
You can open, yeah.
For Christoph, can you? Okay, but if If you just press, yeah, okay.
Let's
Something
see.
is happening.
Can you see? Can you see the presentation?
No, well, yes, we can. Please.
Is that it?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Very well.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the word. I really appreciate being in this company that I personally and professionally really enjoy. So as Yuri mentioned, my background is in psychology. So I'm pleased to be in the group of economists looking at the same issues from a quite different angle, trying or doing my best to complement your debates with the concepts that we psychologists have developed very well. So every now and then I'll step into your field. Hopefully you will not feel that I'm, let's say, taking too much space from what you understand so well. I'm not trying to do that. What I'm trying to do is to connect the two domains for the greater or better understanding. So my name is Katja Hlieb. I come from the company B Solutions. It is a consulting company, a solution selling company. What we do, we provide strategic advice to boards of directors, and sometimes then, of course, we work with all of the company, mainly in the field of human resources and overall strategy. And the other part of our company deals with big financial solutions for governments. So I'll start my presentation with the statement that probably leans into economy in a very simplified version, especially after listening to the Christopher, but please allow me to really simplify that first statement that says, our economy sits on an assumption that at the end, only viable real collateral of worth is by default of tangible material nature, like land, oil, or gold. In my presentation, I will try to present to an alternative view how from psychological perspective, a continuous growth as a natural principle can be looked at and applied to the economy. When the mainstream orthodox economic paradigm defined what they want from the companies or other organizations to do, they also defined what the success looks like. So they understood that there is people into companies or organizations, and they understood that the science that deals with the people is psychology. So this is why they came to the domain of psychology and kind of ordered the cocktail of the psychological components or issues that can be assessed and trained and developed in order to serve whatever the orthodox economic paradigm defined as success. And for the simplification of this presentation, let's say that the good bottom line would be a defined measure of success. I understand that it's not the only one, but for the simplification of the presentation, let's keep it this way. So with such a request, they came to the psychologist, and the psychologist then thought long and hard what would be the supportive measures that psychology knows about that would predict this wanted behavior and attitude in any profession. As we are talking about leadership today, let's say that this profession is a CEO. Otherwise, the same rules apply to any other profession like janitor, accountant, whatever you name. So what psychologists did, we started to look around what do we use with other institutions. And sure enough, golden standard, not to be mixed with what golden standard is in an economy. Golden standard as a rule always is that what works in the army, in the military, probably a little bit watered down, will work in organizations. So today we know of a big cocktail of traits that we are looking for in leaders, in executives of organizations that help us predict success of these people. Let's say a thorough examination of such an individual, of such a candidate, comes down to 60 to 100 measures. You would name it in your terms, you would say that this is risk assessment. Let's say this is psychological risk assessment. Okay. So it comes down to 60 to 100 measures that I don't want to bug you about because it's really far too complex for today.
It looks a little bit more complex than finance at this point.
In a way it is, but when aggregated appropriately, then it can be very easy and easy to apply and use, and this is my intention to do today. So among those measures, being very, let's say, generalistic, I'm pretty sure that most of you have met those in your personal lives as executives looking for a job or as executives hiring other people. So what we look after is personality traits, occupational interests, set of values, IQ, EQ, team roles, accuracy, and you name it. So there is a bunch of batteries that we use. But we were invited to think further, and the next step was to start to develop leadership theories. Maybe it is well known or not, but leadership theories are mostly psychology. Like 80% of leadership theories is psychological material, and 80% approximately of leadership scientists are psychologists. So the science of leadership has been developed along the lines of big man theories. That was the let's say, first in line. So there, I mean, we all know what that is. So one big leader having it all. Then the second large stream was the leader-follower dynamics, where we recognize that follower is just as important as the leader, or namely, they said the leader becomes the leader with the first follower. Then the third, that is already a little bit trending, is leading networks. That is very similar to Mintzberg's idea of communionships. This is, let's say, in big corporation of 25,000 employees, you'd really down to the boxes of 25 people that actually operate like limited liability companies, and you switch them off and switch them on according to all the Christopher standards named before. But actually this is like a grape of communions. And then the fifth very, very major trend in leadership theories is so-called neurogeneral leadership theories. Some of them are named in my bracket. They're called authentic, ethical, transformational, moral, responsible. And they're, let's say, the red line, not to be too moralistic here, because to be moralistic is not really healthy, and we don't want that. But the red line among those theories was that we were trying to look for something more than just pure transaction. So you give me, I give you, and the end of the deal is here. So all these neurogeneral leadership theories, they look for a more human factor within the leadership. And I think this is due not to because we somehow became, let's say, more afraid of being bad people, but because of our genuine interest in growing into better quality human beings. So for today's presentation, I would like to invite you to a slide that will maybe require a little bit more thinking or even participation from your side. And I promise there is only 2 more like this. But this one will probably require a little bit of our common thinking. This slide is not derived from any sort of literature. This is my thinking. It is logical thinking, and I would like to invite you to search for collaterals in psychological concepts to your economic concepts. I wrote few of them down within Christopher's really brilliant presentation, and I'll try to make the bridges from one to another in order to make us all think how we actually develop our systems in accordance with our human nature, or when we don't, our systems fail. Let's see. So what I put down is as follows. If the world's resources are finite and limited and present the collateral, sorry, I don't see this.
Yeah, the collateral for the man-made institution or concept or finite money, then from the psychological perspective, three things must be true. Please go on.
Yes, let me repeat, sorry. If the world's resources are finite and limited, and they present the collateral for the man-made institution or concept of the finite money, then from psychological perspective, these three things must be true. The first, human being will fight for these limited resources through two psychological mechanisms. First is survival, and the second is greed. This is nothing to be judgmental about, nothing to be happy about. This is just the data, okay? Imagine like you're, maybe most of your finance people or whatever, whenever you look at the balance sheet, you don't have emotion, right? When the psychologist looks at the emotions, they don't have emotion about the emotion. Do you understand what I'm saying? So please try to stay objective about those emotions. Don't let them trigger us, okay? So human beings will fight for these limited resources through two psychological mechanisms. First is survival urge, and we have two survival urges. First is physical, so am I gonna be fed tomorrow, and am I gonna be sheltered tomorrow? And psychological. So when the human being is not touched for so much, for let's say for so long, or not cared for, or not loved, or not respected, not appreciated, let's say in an example of maybe more male-oriented people, we have the survival urge. So this is as needed as water and food on the physical end. And the greed, we all have greed to some degree. It is the question of how much we happen to mitigate it or not. And this is nothing to really, let's say, brag about. It is something to look at. So greed is the notion of wanting more just because, and we all have it to one degree or another in one area or more than one area. But also C is true for human beings, which is we tend to care and share for each other. We tend to care for each other and we tend to share with each other. So if we have one piece of bread and we could easily eat two, and there is two of us, we will share. Okay, so when the resources are limited, these three psychological mechanisms come to play. Then the second proposal is, if we make up a tangible collateral as a means of exchange of value like money, it must be mitigated by a psychological mechanism. When you go to school, I mean, I was now at the School of Economics for some time, and I've learned that what backs up the money is trust, right? I thought that must have been a good joke, okay? Like I thought it must have been a good joke that the human being is rational as one of your three postulates, and I'm really having a friendly conversation here because we hopefully learn a lot from each other. But the other aspect that money is backed up with is definitely fear. So am I going to have enough in psychological terms and in physical terms? We both know that at least as much as trust, the fear operates. Among the psychological among the needs that are not to be met or we fear not to be met, the most significant are safety and significance. There is actually 6 of them that I'm not going to name here because we need to be short, but safety and significance very, very often come to play with money. And the fancy banking language would say, low risk, sound business model, steady cash flow. A simple psychological explanation for this would be basic need for safety. Let's say issued recommendation on EU green bonds. sophisticated financial language that would be translated into psychological need of security that we all have. And then the second, the significance, I also dotted one down, reputational risk to companies, investors, and banks. In psychological terms, it drills down to the simple human need of significance. We all have it, and the more on the plain side it is, the more cultural we can be about it, the less primitive we can be about it, but it's a definite link. And the third statement is, since the economy runs on debt as a mechanism behind means of exchange, like money, I'm thinking of psychological collaterals to debt. One is certainly at play is guilt. Guilt is a very low vibrational emotion that is drilling people down. Actually, in German language, debt is pronounced Schuld, which is guilt directly, right? And my additional proposition is that when we try to advance as human beings, shall we start to think about debt in connection with commitment? So if I get I get to borrow the money from you, I now feel committed, I don't feel guilty in order to pay back. So these are much more potent psychological concepts that I'm going to explain about why they are yielding much higher return on investment, definitely in psychological terms, but I'm pretty sure that also in pure economic terms, and why they are big money savers, so cost cutters. I would like to, for a moment, go into the explanation of human brain. I'm pretty sure you all have seen this picture many times over, which is basically we have little brain, we have middle brain, and we have big brain. Our lower brain, actually, it has 4 responses. It is fear, fight, freeze, and flight. Middle brain is emotional brain, and our upper brain is the only brain that is, that is capable of conscious response, that is capable of logics, that is capable of abstract thinking, that is capable of empathy, and that is capable of compassion. How much time do you think people spend in which part of the brain?
I hope they spend a lot of time in the upper brain.
Me too. Me too. Unfortunately, this is not entirely true. But what is a good news is that we can we can subscribe to lifelong exercise into staying as much as possible for as long as possible under as many triggers as possible in the bigger brain. This is our life goal. Actually, none of us is there yet, not at all, but going there makes the concepts that you're talking about even possible to live. Okay, so the person that lives in small brain all of the time, it doesn't mean that they are not educated or that they are not intelligent. Okay, this has nothing to do one with another. Simply cannot capture or live the concepts you're talking about. Okay. So how the upper brain develops and why that matters. First notion that I would like to really underline is that newest research, which I'm perfectly sure you're all aware of, says that we have neuroplasticity, therefore brain develops all our life. Even when I was at school, we said that the brain stops to develop at the age of 25. Today we know this is not true. So none of us is on the dead end street, which is a good news, but the bad news is that the brain, in order to be further developed, needs gymnastics. And what is the brain gymnastics? That would actually bring the brain to the full capacity. First notion or first fact is that the big brain cannot be developed before the 28th chronological age, even if under perfect and the best of circumstances. But most of us don't live in perfect and best of circumstances. Therefore, we either don't develop the brain or we need more time to develop the brain. But what is the things that help to do it? There is three parts of the exercises or conditions that need to be met in order for the brain to develop. First, cognitively, we need to be exposed to gnosis, to relearning, and not stuffing with ideologies. I sometimes refer to not the first 1% that is guilty of everything, but I sometimes refer to the next 10% that are guilty of supporting ideologies and not leaning into gnosis, right? Because we are intellectual buffer to the world, like maybe 1% is in a financial buffer to the world, although I don't want to discuss that at the moment, but let's discuss the 10% and the development of the brain. So gnosis, not ideologies. Cognitive exercise, nothing new to you, and challenge. Of course, this goes for men and women. Otherwise, men thrive on challenge more than women, and cognitive efforts. So it's very similar, like in the gym, as many ways you lift, the more fit you are. Emotionally, without care, love. Love in let's say definitely in Slovenian language, but maybe even in English language, it would also always remind us, or very often remind us, of the Greek version of love that is called eros. Now, love has many more versions of it, and agape is love for living beings and living things. So proper attention and good quality human connection. Now, the good quality human connection, the lack of, leads into dependence. Now, I don't want to even see the raise of hands how many dependent people we all know, of all walks of lives. So this is the parts of the brain, or the ways we are not, let's say, developing the circumstances for our brain to be ideally developed. And physically, of course, micro and macro foods. We have an expert on our panel here about that. Good kind of water, exercise, therefore oxygen. Human touch and the touch with nature. This is not enough. The absence of GMOs, fluoride, aluminium, and other poisonous chemicals are very, very crucial to the brain. Not to put into the cocktail the spiritual dimension that also many scientists talk about. So this is, tomorrow it will be like science and spiritual wisdom. Really good spiritual wisdom will walk hand in hand. Today, this is a very clear step forward. But let's name the scientists that we are all very familiar with, and the concepts that we are hopefully not triggered with, which are the concepts of intuition, truth, wisdom, light, synergy, synchronicity, singularity. So these are the conditions in which the brain develops optimally. And in such a way, we can develop so-called higher states of consciousness. What is that? Consciousness is the word that has been here ever since the man was born. So this is not a new invention at all. It is maybe just more talked about today. And for the first time, actually, in the science of psychology, there have been attempts to describe consciousness, like there is in physics, like there is in separate science of consciousness. But I will, for the purpose of today's conversation, only lean on two psychological theories. First is by Robert Kegan, and the other comes from the book Good to Great that I'm pretty positive that most of you have read or heard about. So if we go to the first theory, it's Robert Kegan's. It's a very complicated theory, and I'll drill it down to you in a simple manner as possible. As you can see here, there is 5 levels of consciousness. What Kegan says, beforehand, we believed there were only 3. Kegan was the one that discovered the 4th and the 5th as the means of adult development. And therefore, I'm only mentioning here 3 levels, which is 3rd, 4th, and 5th, which is socialized mind, self-altering mind, and self-transforming mind. They differ on these 6 dimensions that you can see on the picture, which is compassion, empathy, complexity of awareness, perspectival awareness, self-insight, rational awareness, and contextual awareness. But what is a simplified version of this? Like people on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th level make a sense of self, make a quality of their relationships, and make their outward perspectives very different. To put it in practical terms, most of the people, adult people in Western world, at least, are at the level of socialized mind, which is the level that is developed in adolescence. And what it basically means is I think as you think in order to belong into this group. Most adults are on this level. Most of the employees you will get into the government or into any organization will be on this level. So the concept of circular economy, let's say, if you install it into a socialized mind, yes, we are all for circular economy because this is today fashionable. Okay, let's go there because we get money there and we need money to survive. Okay. Then when we develop to the self-authoring mind, this is the level of mind when I'm author of my own thinking, when I'm author of my own emotions and of my own theories. Here I can greet the same concept, let's say circular business, but I have my own thinking about why is it good. Okay, and then there is, let's say most executives today are on this level. And then is the 5th level, self-transforming mind that is actually capable of making meta conclusions out of solid systems and theories. Let's say, let's combine economy and psychology together and let's do the meta-narrative. Or let's combine the 3 bottom lines together and create the meta-narrative. This would be the examples of self-transforming minds. Today, the businesses that really want to transform into the next level, so encompassing like global perspectives, multinational perspectives, ecological perspectives, and whatnot, they need to go from 4 to 5, otherwise they do not succeed. In a much simpler language, the opposite is also true. So before a human being develops this kind of brain, they cannot access complex concepts like this. They simply cannot. The complementary aspect from Jim Collins, From Good to Great, probably you've heard of this book. What he does, he assesses the Fortune 500 companies and he finds 11 that far outperform in financial terms the other companies, and he looks for the factors that make them better. And first among 8 is that level 5 leadership, leaders who are humble but driven to do what is best for the company, are always present in these companies. And level 4 leaders that are super confident star leaders whose personal brand and the short-term personal financial incentive far outweighs the interest of the company are the level 4 leaders, and they usually dip the company or they keep it at the same level. So this is not the judgmental statements at all. It's just the facts stated. Okay, if I drink a water, I will no longer be thirsty. This is just facts. I'm not preaching who has to be what or who doesn't have to be what. I'm just telling from the psychological perspective what kind of people bring what kind of results. The conclusion from these 2 theories would be that level 5 leadership is qualitatively very different from the level 4 leadership that is common today. In today's environment, developmental level 5 leader will outperform the level 4 leader. I hope that I read that right, or didn't I? It's okay. So what can be our final take on what has been said? If there is limited resources like land, water, oil, gold, and let's say in order for them to become enough for the humanity, so that we kind of get our grid in check. So they become enough for the humanity. We start to focus on growth in intangible arenas that are limitless for an individual and the collective. So it goes both ways. When we start to focus on intangibles that can be grown to the limitless proportions, like consciousness, then suddenly we'll have enough of the material that there is, and we'll simply share, because we'll have a space to grow into the intangible and unlimited. Then the second conclusion is we derive all or most of our legitimate psychological needs, like needs for safety and significance mentioned before, through growth that is mainly intangible. So this is what I just said. If we start to get these needs met from not spending Earth's resources, we can preserve the Earth and we can still have our psychological needs met, okay? Because if my genuine need for significance is met by 17 pairs of new shoes and 3 Louis Vuittons and 2 Maseratis and 2 football clubs, I have the right to do that because my psychological need for safety is genuine. But if you replace my psychological need for safety through all these material resources with some attractive immaterial resources, my psychological need is saturated and I don't need to deplete the Earth anymore. And the third and last is kind of aggregation of the upper two. In order to achieve 1 and 2, we must develop our consciousness in the way that significantly more of us will operate from our big brain, so from higher orders of consciousness as much time as possible. There is actually 2 practical solutions upon this world that already do that. One is from previous century, and it comes from Sweden and Denmark, and one is from this century and comes from the United States of America. And I would just go into the first example in 1 minute and then I'm finished. So this first example is very interesting. It comes from the book of Thomas Bjorkman, and I don't know what is the name of the lady, but her family name is Anderson. They wrote a book, The Nordic Secret, which tells us about deliberate effort of Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian governments of bringing people that were more or less rural population into the retreat centers when they were between ages 20 and 30. So this would be according to level at the level Keegan at the level 3, and they would bring these young people into these retreat centers where they could have stayed for 6 months and they didn't do anything but develop their brain. And in 50 years, Sweden has gone, and Denmark and Norway have gone from the tail of the list of the successful economies to the very top. And today they're losing it, and they're kind of thinking of redoing this thing with the camps, but this is one of the ways to do it. And the second that comes from the United States is proposed by Robert Keegan. Maybe some of you have seen this book too. This is On Anyone's Culture is the title of the book, but what he discusses is a deliberately developmental organization, which means that within the organization that you're working at, the environment is set in order for you to easily access the next level of consciousness. So my bottom line is that these concepts can only be captured from the certain level of consciousness. But this is not a dead end because it can be trained. So take it as a good news or a bad news. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very impressive. And this was at least an intermediate course into psychology and the understanding of the functioning of brain of the brain. But Katja, I think you were a little bit too polite.
Okay.
With circular, with all those who are challenging circular transformation. What do you think we need? How can we get trained as people Because I think, you know, I think the secret of your, the sharpness of your lesson is in that slide where which you introduced by saying that this was just your thinking.
Yes.
Because there you say, you know, there's some greed around and some bad habits generally. But on the other hand, there are also ways, so, you know, of cooperation and you know, mutual support and compassion. So I think there must be something there, but I would like you to explain this better.
Thank you for the brave question, Yuri, because here is where the devil lies, but here is also where the prize lies. In psychology, you are very early on trained that every single one of us has two sides. One is the light side and one is the shadow side, right? And for as long as you are not willing or capable of looking into your shadow side, you're doomed. At the very moment you are able to embrace your shadow side, you can go further. And I think this is the very, very potent area for all of us, be it practitioners, for us that consult the practical practitioners of circular business or similar concepts, and more or less our friends, because we hang on with people that shape society, don't we? And I really liked it when Christopher said, and I'm sorry that I'm also always referring to him, but I really wrote that down, and it was interesting to me when he was referring to minimum standards, right? And the banks are going to look at what do you spend your money on, right? And they don't particularly kind of like gambling tomorrow. Fine, I'm really good with that. If we would, let's say, add into the standards that we are not fond of child trafficking, I would be even more fun, you know? And there is no shame in being deeply sick. There is shame in not openly talk about it, because if we don't, we are never going to climb over it, never ever, not as an individual, not as a group, and not as a humanity, as a collective.
So simply, we can master the complex transformations only when we train our people. I mean, when there are conditions for personal growth, as I can conclude, and we cannot expect that getting to a higher floor would be possible if we don't elevate people to a higher floor first.
When you say we, who is we?
Well, I mean, generally, we as managers, we as transformation managers, basically. Okay.
So, okay, can you just repeat the core of the question?
I'm saying one thing that I'm concluding here is that we cannot expect a success from any complex transformation that requires, you know, the adoption of the value side of transformation. If we don't if we don't provide conditions for personal growth to each individual that is involved, and so we cannot expect that organizations can grow only in technical terms, you know, by, you know, being netted among people who didn't have room to progress, to basically to develop as personalities.
Yes, yes. I mean, a very logical question and very logical answer to it is absolutely yes. Although there is one more thing that I would like to add, which is an interesting, like, self-perpetuating mechanism, which is that people are developing regardless the environment. The history has taught us that even in most harsh environments, the people would develop in line with their internal schedule, and Kagan calls that the hidden curriculum of adult life. So in order for these concepts to even come to life, some people must have forgone these processes in their heads, and to the certain degree all of us have, which we all know because we talk about it, and we talk about the shadowy and the sweet and the sour aspects of it, right? And it has both. So, but in short, yes.
Very well. So, you know, it makes me think that when with the circularity assessment, or with any, you know, with the circularity assessment that we propose to any company, we would, or with any kind of disclosure required by a bank, we should also, if we really want to be successful transformation managers, we should also understand the level of cognitive maturity of our team, of our co-workers, of our members of the organization, which is quite a complex issue for managers, because I remember that that managerial tools proliferate very successfully whenever they can be kind of simplified into, you know, simple 4-box matrices, like the CAST tool. You know, we purposely wanted to make it simple because it can be easily embraced, but then nevertheless we cannot expect success if we don't make room for the value transition as well, right?
Yes, I fully agree. And as you can see also in practice, the opposite is also true. You are invited in the environments where they have already done at least partly this work, and they feel the more. Also, when on the level 4 or top management, you can rarely find on the level 3, but hypothetically we can also speak about it. But level 4 is very common. So there they would embrace your concept because it yields some kind of incentive they're used to from before. Okay. Yeah. If your new rule would be, I don't know, bring 100 apples, then this would be a new rule, right? But there it contains, for as long as it yields the incentive. And this is not what we are looking for, because it's a short-term strategy.
Katja, I think the next time we gather as expert practitioners, we can discuss a good practice, or you know, one best practice of a circular transformation and leadership, because I can imagine, you know, some ways how such a complex transformation can be led. Definitely, there are no big secrets, but it's definitely a masterpiece when you succeed. It's a unique masterpiece when you succeed to carry out such a complex transformation. And such masterpieces do exist, and we can learn from them. And definitely, I mean, there's no secret that you need to lead by example. There's no secret that integrity helps. And there's no secret that intelligence really helps as well. And putting emotions behind smart moves should also somehow help, and many should also help, and many other such things. So, but it would really be interesting if we could get back together with you and examine one such example that could illustrate and further reinforce the message that it is nothing technical. You cannot succeed only. It's not switching from A to B. It's not switching like, you know, we are not switching on the above. It's much more complex, and it's about organizations and humans. And so when we are challenging circular transformations and the challenges that we more widely address as sustainability challenges, we need to make room for people to grow and to identify and find their place in the big picture. So I think I hope you can also accept this challenge, because we want companies to be successful. who are embracing circular transformations, and we want to be people to be successful, who are motivated to doing so. And I think that would be very, very beneficial if we could, and also quite a fresh contribution, because I mean, there's quite a wide notion that circular transformations are nothing, just technical, but I think there has still been too little attention to the human aspect of such endeavors. So I would, if you all agree, I would vote for Katja to come back with this beautiful homework, and she will be most welcome among us.
If I may have just a really short closing comment, my passion really lies on, I've seen more than 5,000 executives one-on-one on interviews and developmental sessions myself during my career. So I think that I know these people to the bone. And when my heart really hurts is when these people that go, like individuals, they're well-performing top managers, but when they start to transcend from level 4 to level 5, they have no support at all whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And this is such a loss. This is such a loss. If I was a bank, I would get like chills all over, because I wouldn't want to find such a loss, if you understand what I'm saying. So this is, I mean,
yeah, and my final take would be it's a loss for companies, it's a loss for individuals, but around us, we may, if we want to see, we may, and that's my final invitation, we may also see that it could be a loss for countries.
Yeah, definitely.
And hopefully, I mean, the price is high, that the price is very high that this pandemic has charged, but hopefully the lesson has been taken, and intelligent leadership is getting some appreciation. So thank you very much, Katja, for this, very enlightening. The time is pressing, so I hope you allow me to go on.
There was one more question, I think, from Tomasz. You wanted to, he raised his hand.
Yeah, Tomasz, please.
I understand that time is pressing, and I don't want to elaborate, but I would like to thank Yuri and Katja for this very open-minded and sincere discussion you had in front of the audience. And the thing I got out of it is that in a way we shouldn't be focusing on even though with all due respect to the circular, which is circular in the material world, or it can be circular in the financial world, because finance are circular in another sense as well. We should really be targeting at growth in the, as Yuri used the word, cognitive maturity, and Katja will probably confirm that this is a good word, or there's even a better one according to Keegan. That's where growth is, and that's growth which is sustainable, and that's some of our latest discussions we had with Katja when I brought up the idea of quantum money and quantum consciousness within the frames of countable infinite Hilbert spaces, blah blah blah, to jump over that. And if there, and as a joke to conclude, if there's something that can come out ultimately out of this quantumization of consciousness, and it's not going to be a quantum-based nuclear power plant, but it would be a power plant that would burn stupidity and turn it into wisdom.
Thank you.
As nuclear waste.
Thank you very much, Tomasz.
Thanks.
And definitely we can continue, and hopefully we can improve the interpretation of the term sustainability. We have arrived at the conclusive moments of the second part of our seminar dedicated to circular expert practitioners. We wanted to understand a new approach to circularity and the understanding of risk. I would like to thank to Christoph Bündmann, to Katja Hleb, to other speakers of the first part of our seminar, Slaven Mičković, and my two dear colleagues, Jana Fajrod and Sebastian Žužek, who all have made this seminar possible, and I believe very interesting and insightful. I would like to thank to all of you who have checked the 2.0 version of the Circular Assessment Score, which is now live and accessible from our website. Also thanks to the early outcomes of the Circular 4.0 Interact project. Please stay with us through the year. Our intensive program is only gearing in. So in the next month, as I have already announced, on the 17th of March, we begin with the initiation workshop of our first circular acceleration training. This is the first round of the circular acceleration training of the Circular 4.0 project destined to the Alpine Space part of the Interact project, as I've said. So it's the 17th of March. We will keep you posted, and in the autumn there will be the second Circular Expert Practitioner Seminar this year, where we will be again together with the purpose to broaden some of the striking topics concerning circularity and sustainable transformations at large. Last but not least, and hopefully my slides have not frozen, thank you to all expert practitioners. This time, some of you have had a chance to be more active than others, and of course you are all invited to join in. And my last notion is to welcome Vesna Lautižar. She's been with us so many times. She works from Osaka, Japan. She's a researcher at the university in Osaka, and her specialties when it comes to circularity are related to the extended producer responsibility and circular product design. I hope Vesna will be able to share her findings with us in the near future as well. And I'm not sure whether she's still with us, because I think it's the middle of the night in Japan right now. So Vesna is our new expert practitioner, and of course we will be happy to involve other people who are motivated to share with us their practical and theoretical knowledge and expertise. I'm looking forward to meeting you soon next time, and I thank you for your attention and active participation at this seminar. Have a nice evening, and goodbye.